We speak. Our words. We listen.
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 Now, we have one of our team, Lucy, with a Substack, Autie Unmasked. I'm hoping that you're gonna read something out for us, Lucy, today to talk about.
Yep, absolutely. It's called This Week in Glitches. This was a very early time for me, going out there and being part of a community. I was only just really coming to this point where I was able to go out and talk. There is something in the air this week, other than the whiff of the last barbecues of a dying summer. Everything has been going so well. I've been surfing on a wave of adrenaline, buoyed by all the positive feedback I've had from my autism coming out to cyberspace. It's been uniformly wonderful and truly inspiring to know that my previously candid ramblings are resonating so strongly with people. I have been lucky enough to be invited to be a guest on a few podcasts and to write some articles. Amazing opportunities that I never thought would ever manifest. I also gave a talk to a local support group in a communal cafe where I spoke to many people who, like me, are finding ways to cope. I learned about others on the spectrum who share a diagnosis but display very different symptoms and comorbidities, especially some mental health issues. We spoke about the referral process and the wait time. It's now elongated to years and years rather than weeks or months, and it seems to be true. According to the latest NHS data, 172,022 people are waiting for an autism assessment in England. This is a 47% increase in the number of people waiting in just 1 year, an almost unbelievable number, which makes me feel privileged and fortunate to have come this far. There are so many people still hanging in limbo. One of the attendees at my informal lecture had been waiting so long that the anticipation has made them question whether they are even strong enough to go on.
Wow. I mean, that last bit, that somebody is finding getting diagnosed so difficult that they're questioning whether it's worth continuing the diagnosis process. Well, it just says everything about where we're at, doesn't it?
It was really sad to hear. This was quite a young lady who had some other complications as well, a few health complications alongside her diagnosis with autism. She was quite introvert. She didn't really like talking, but we sat and we managed to get speaking about it. And she just felt that the longer she waited, the less she felt like she was going to be able to go through it. It's almost like the way that if I'm going to have an appointment, I want it early in the morning so I can get it done and out of the way. And because it was so far in the distance and she was kind of galloping towards it now and nearly there, that she started to doubt that she was going to be able to be strong enough to go through it. And you just wonder about these protracted waits that people go through in order to get their late diagnosis, whether there is this tendency just to say, look, you know, I am what I am, and sort of back away from it because you're just too frightened to take that last step.
Was she offered an advocate at all? Because I fear for people who get into that situation and then can't communicate their needs and therefore don't get what they're after, which is a diagnosis.
Yes, because of some of her other health problems, she did have somebody who was kind of social worker. She did say that she lived in accommodation where she was looked after because of some of the things that were alongside her autism. But I think it was just a simple fact that for me, I got my diagnosis quite quickly, but now it's starting to get to a point where people are seeing it as a far distant destination that they're having to jog towards. And it's exhausting to think that you're going to get there at some point. She started to get stage fright because she's overthought it. That's just the time frame that they're looking at now is too long for people. And they kind of want to just say, no, not me. I'm not going to do that, because they're just scared of what it's going to be like when they get there.
Yeah, you can see why people want to self-diagnose.
Well, this is it. You end up just self-diagnosing and never really getting it. I didn't want to spend my life feeling like I was not formally diagnosed. I felt that this was something I needed to do. I guess for some people, they can just live with that self-diagnosis, but it does mean that there's no, is it terrible? Like you get kind of rubber stamped and say, you're with this crew now. And I guess if you stay undiagnosed, yes, you'll find ways to support yourself, but some groups you may not find yourself, allowed into.
Yeah, it's like that sense of agency, isn't it? Sometimes when I was going through it, I felt it was almost fated. Things fell into place, but there was a sense of agency there too, because I was triggered by what a friend had said. And I thought maybe I should follow that path.
I think maybe a lot of people go the way that my process was a doctor who brought up the symptoms and sent me off to go and discover for myself, and did say, it's time for a referral as far as I'm concerned. It was a long road to get there. Nobody had picked it up before, and God only knows I'd been in and out of mental health services for years and been given a diagnosis upon diagnosis upon diagnosis, which made me came away feeling weaker and feeling like less able to cope with me, because I was thinking, there's something terribly wrong with me. But having that autism diagnosis actually made me stronger, because it was like, well, okay, I know how to deal with this. But yeah, I think everybody finds a path in. It's just how easy it is to get there and have people around you who are going to support you during the process as well of getting a diagnosis. You have to have somebody have your back, almost, be behind you saying it's fine and pushing you towards that diagnosis. I have to admit that this all felt like an out-of-body experience. Not near death, but certainly near out of breath. I felt as if I was outside of myself, floating above, observing me, not in the security of an operating surgery laid out on a table, but standing exposed in a public space, pouring my heart out to strangers, being scrutinised and eavesdropped on by any normal patrons tucking into the cake and coffee close by. I was loudly confiding and baring my soul in a manner conducive to lying on a couch and unloaded onto a sagely nodding therapist, rather than shouting over the clutter of cutlery.
Wow, that description. The talking therapy. Sometimes that's all we need, is just to talk it out.
Yeah. It was a strange way to go. I'm pouring my heart out to strangers. I was getting lots of nods and sort of smiles and people understanding. Once I got my diagnosis, things kind of stopped in terms of support. I was really buoyed up by having my diagnosis. And after that, everything went quiet. And I thought, well, what do I do now? What do I do now? And having to then insert yourself into groups and mix with new people and discuss it with other people like me. It all had to be led by me then, and find things that I could do in order to kind of get therapy through a group setting.
Yeah, I found the root of most of my issues goes back to a very similar experience that you just described. But when I was 5 years old at primary school, and it's that first time you stand up and represent yourself in your voice and in your being with other people.
Absolutely. I've been thinking back. I was thinking back a couple of days ago about my first experiences of school. Those first few months in that environment were so troubling to me. I can remember myself being a tot and being in a classroom full of strangers and just willing myself out there all the time, wanting to get away from there. I didn't understand how this should feel. And the first year was a struggle for me. I got better as I got older, but the first couple of years were a struggle just to be there and to feel comfortable there. As something that I still find very challenging if I'm going to be doing something. If I'm going to be going into a job, and I've had loads of jobs, it's really challenging to be there and with those people and try and kind of carve out some sort of relationship with them.
there's another theme that's just popped in, and that is about after your diagnosis that you had found relatively easy to get hold of, and you appreciate that now that door is closed for a lot of people. It's really difficult to get hold of that closure, that diagnosis closure. You then had to go and find other spaces and other places yourself. It seems to me that by far the majority of autistic people, because of autism, that thing that you did, finding other spaces, knocking on doors, and it often enough feeling a little bit rejected or daunted by those doors. Not everyone can do that. And if people are going to support us, giving us a diagnosis, then leaving us to our own devices is not good enough. Giving us a diagnosis and then giving us some kind of well put together short course to explain autism to ourselves, that's not good enough either. What has to be done is to have a third thing following, and that is the networking support. A way for people who are naturally averse to networking and making groups and joining things, making it available to them in an easy way. And for me, this whole thing about having a diagnosis and then being dumped, having a course that explains the diagnosis and then being dumped. And then the next stage is if they do get it, if they do get some kind of networking opportunities, then the problem comes is how they are run well enough for people who are autistic to manage to stay inside those groups long enough to get benefit from them. Because there's a dumping that happens inside those groups as well, an internal rejection of autistic people. It's a 3-stage thing for me. And I'm not entirely sure that the diagnosis itself is of any value for people when you consider what's likely to happen after it. It feels to me that people that start from the other way round, that manage to get themselves held a wing around them from somebody else and involved in a group, might be doing it the better way round. Getting some autistic experience and support before going on to the flashcard explanation of autism, and then before getting the diagnosis. It seems to me as though we've got it not only the wrong way round, but we only go as a society to giving a diagnosis and dumping people mostly. Am I in tune with people here?
In my experience was I worked really hard to get the diagnosis. And then I basically got sent, and this is all the support I got from that, a photocopied batch of paper, which was meant to really explain to me where I was at that moment and what I could be doing. And it was quite, they were trying to cover every base. And, they obviously send this out to everybody after they'd done the test. They had sort of like, how do you keep yourself organized? Are you any good at money? But it felt like nothing. I've still got it because it's kind of laughable what they were saying on there. And it was, I found it that it was, they were trying to, and I know it's really difficult to make a publication fit everybody, but it was so very basic that I was like, no, just forget it. No. But I think people having to go and find some means of support after a diagnosis is just, it's difficult unless you can find that within you, find the energy within you to keep going forward and find places where you can sit and be part of a group. And even the group that I was next sort of placed in was so very general. It wasn't for people with autism. It was people with all sorts of different things in their lives, which made them alienated, which meant I'm going into a room where I'm not with my people. I suppose it depends. And I can see that everybody's saying in the text that that's probably more than you got. But this is the problem. There isn't much that goes on after a diagnosis at all.
I feel as though we might be doing this the wrong way around. And that as diagnosis is so far off in the future, what people really need is, when they are questioning whether they might be autistic, they need a community involvement with autistic people that might give them some sense of certainty and support before they get anywhere near the textbook explanations that come on the flashcards in the support services that people sometimes run, and before the diagnosis itself. It seems to me as though we should be working towards a diagnosis rather than working from a diagnosis.
Well, if there's nothing being offered, really, you might as well act as if.
It would be good if there were, like you say, before you actually get your diagnosis, more of a support coming up to that so that you know what you're going to expect on the other side of this. This is the thing. You go into doing this thing, but is preparation being the best way of doing this so that you know that if you get to the other side of this, you'll have been set up to be able to cope and know what it's going to be like afterwards and know what you could do afterwards. And that should start before you go in for all the tests. I had weeks of psychology and stuff. Before I went into that, if I'd had a bit more of a chat with somebody who could tell me what it would be like on the other side of the diagnosis, that would have been great, really.
It's like, ask yourself, what would you do if you got the diagnosis? And then that leads to deeper questions like, what do you actually want from gaining this diagnosis and resolving aspects of your life, yourself? Like, what is the narrative that you're within here?
It's a big question to ask what you want out of it. I guess for me, it was just a validation, like a medical validation, really, that I was going down the right path. I wanted my pain to have a name. And before that, for years, I had been in pain through mental health and through being told that it's just a case of take this pill and you'll be fine. All of that had been churning in my background. And it was horrible. Years and years of it. When I finally went, no, this is the road. And I did it. Like, it just like all the pressure went. I know now what I'm supposed to be doing. I know now that I don't need to be on 50 kinds of meds and being told on a regular basis that I had some sort of personality disorder. I didn't. But that's what I'd been told over and over. So what I wanted to get out of it really was to say up yours to the people who had said all these things to me before.
Up yours, great.
Because the mental health people were terrible. Ever since I was a kid. And it just, nothing seemed to be right for me. And they were pushing me. I remember going to the doctors and having to list every single type of antidepressant and drug that I'd been on in the past because they were running out of new ones to try on me. I'm sorry, I'm getting angry about it, but it's true. It was like, they'll go, well, okay, so what have you had in the past? I'm saying I've had Prozac, I've had fluoxetine, I've had, mirtazapine. And they're going, right, because we're not really finding anything new we could put you on that's going to be any better. They were trying to give me stuff that made me drowsy. They were trying to give me stuff that made me feel kind of like better during the day. But it was all of this sort of guessing, and I got so medically involved with the idea that there was something fundamentally wrong with my personality that it made me feel less and less and less.
Positive swearing. I love when the body takes over from the mind.
Yeah, I guess I had it's like, you know, is looking back and going, sod 'em all, really. It was a good place for me to be, because I felt, well, you know, I've been saying for years, look, you're not helping me. And there's been times where they've dallied with kind of, at one point they wanted to put me into sheltered housing. This is many years ago, and said maybe I need someone to look after me. And I never felt that way. They were going to do that for me because they just didn't know what else to do. I'm quite able to run my life and to do my own shopping and all that. I got a social worker who came to see me who said she was going to take me out for ice creams and walks in the park at one point. And all these things, I'm going, why? I just don't need them.
It's really interesting because you're the first person who's really made a very good case for having a diagnosis first, because a diagnosis of autism for you was an escape from misdiagnosis of so many other things. And I think that's very much a female perspective, more than a male perspective, but it happens both ways. And so in your case, you absolutely needed the up yours to all these labels that people had, with the best will possibly, tried to attach to you. Each label had a different prescription that went with the label, and it's all an experiment. Medicine is called practice because that's what it is. Practice this and see whether it works almost. I think the medicine that you experienced was people experimental and trying with doses and trying with labels for you. That is the way it is. So it's the first time for me in your case that somebody has said, no, the diagnosis needs to be the starting point for me because I need to escape from all this misdiagnosis. The other good thing that has come from diagnosis from people has been to do with the benefit system or to do with insurance companies, to do with things that tick a box. Diagnosis ticks a box. It feels though that not everybody needs escape from misdiagnosis, and not everybody needs a ticker box. And so I think for a percentage of our population, a softer, cheaper method of dealing with us would be for those people to have an introduction to the idea of autism through autistic groups that then follow on to a much more formalized explanation that then follow on to diagnosis. And other people will be going the opposite direction at the same time.
It's probably not a case of one size fits all. You know, everybody talks about spectrum. That's the problem, is if you've got something on a spectrum, then there is no one size fits all solution to that. It has to be really done with a one-to-one, somebody talking to somebody about it and being able to talk about the different fears or different feelings you're having, and what your level of comprehension of is how you're going to process that. It's just going to be so difficult to be able to find a world where everybody gets the introduction to their diagnosis that they need. Oh, I'm all out of breath after that. That was a very strong sort of, okay. So it was overwhelming. The amount of knowledge and new experience I took on board correlated exactly with the energy it took out of me. I thanked everyone for being so welcoming and for taking time out to speak to me, and left hurriedly. Back behind the safety of the front door, I felt a very strong sense that perhaps I'm not up to this or deserving of these plaudits. The only real purpose behind talking about this condition openly and frankly is the hope that it encourages others to do the same. But inside, I started to wonder if I was really qualified to speak on others' behalf. I'm in no way a scientist or psychologist. All I really know is myself, what disorders hamper my life, and the eccentricities of my thinking. I've just been through 4 decades defying anyone, myself included, who told me to just snap out of it because I instinctively knew that something was off and there were missing pieces. And now, after all the psychological tests, the weeks of assessment and the final ADOS test, even if I still have the letter which confirmed my diagnosis, I felt a sickening ache that I am in some way about to be called out as a fake. And I guess that's really, I did feel that way. I've waited so long and now I've got it. And then I'm meeting other autistic people and then I'm starting to feel, am I up to doing this now? Should I be doing this now? Do I have the right to be going out and talking to people about diagnosis?
Well, sorry, I couldn't speak there. What bit of it feels fake? I think I understand what you're saying, and I'm trying to reflect personally why I sometimes feel fake. And I think it's because I'm kind of dependent on that external validation, and I've never trusted that. It's like, unless I come up with it, it's not really real.
Yeah. It's when I told a few people that I was autistic and they told me I didn't sound, act autistic. The touch of imposter syndrome, that the sense of being a fraudster, a trickster, unworthy and incompetent, even with tangible evidence to the contrary. I couldn't shake the nerves and the jitters. And at that time I was sleeping really badly and my head was really spinning with it all.
Uncertainty is difficult, but I think it's something we need to embrace, because if we can relax into that and get not a measure of it, a dislike measure, a way of being with it, it can be quite a positive thing. Because we are unwilling to accept all these givens. But it puts you in a very fluid space, which is quite uncertain and a wee bit nerve-wracking, yeah, because we are all conditioned and used to looking for that kind of solidity and security. In fact, society is kind of addicted to security.
I guess as well, the part of my feeling at that time was that I had been through the testing. It was a really long process, and I'm really surprised that other people are saying that it was quite quick. For me, it was weeks and weeks. I was going back every week for another session of 3/4 of an hour chat about things and being asked to explain how I lived my life to them. So when I hear that people got diagnosed really quickly, I think, wow. By the end of it, I had to go for the ADOS test, it's called. And I thought, well, maybe I was just giving the answers they wanted to hear. That was one of my insecurities, was that, did I do this right? Had I passed this exam on my own merits, or did I cheat a little bit in order to get this diagnosis? That was how I was feeling.
I find that telling about how the system is. And I think it's about money. Again. Because the way you were diagnosed required an awful lot of input from an awful lot of different people, some of whom quite serious senior levels on high hourly rates. And it feels to me as though what you were put through was an overcomplicated system. I'll explain my situation, which was to realize I was neurodiverse, and a year later have an appointment with a specialist psychiatrist who was familiar with autism. And during that 1 or 1.5 hour conversation, she was easily able to determine and write a letter that was not a tick box exercise, but had relevant sentences in it which related her experience of me in a video call to the diagnostic criteria. And that was absolutely sufficient. One highly developed person with a good knowledge of autism and a subject who had already got some kind of information on autism and knew the things that they should mention. It's an overcomplicated process for a reason. It's an overcomplicated process, mostly because the status quo requires people to go through the different channels and make sure everybody gets a bite of it and paid along the way.
And it was really complicated. You know, they wanted to speak to my parents who were elderly at the time and couldn't come all the way to where I lived to speak to them. But they want to know somebody who knew in childhood. Well, I know myself what I was like in childhood, really, because I remember it. But they wanted that. I was doing things like miming, making a cup of tea. They were just silly things. And the actual test itself at the end felt as if it was more attuned to a child. I was looking at children's storybooks and being asked to read expressions on the faces of the characters, or given little toy animals and cars. Can you make a story out of this? I'm there at 43 thinking, no, because I'm not 6 anymore. So many bits to it that I just thought, well, that seems a little bit odd to ask me that at this age, when I'm pretty sure of myself that I'm going down the right path.
It sounds like a classic psychological test, sometimes what they use for very young people too. And it also sounds like how the test was described to me in about 2018-19 when I was initially thinking of putting in a request. So then COVID and lockdown and waiting lists. Eventually I was in shock when I got the letter saying turn up. By then it was similar to Jules. It was just this almost a 1 hour conversation with a psychiatrist or psychologist. So something changed there in the process.
The racket I see, private consultations to give you an autism diagnosis, whether you're a child or whether you're an adult, people are now turning to these things. And the more they can do, the more different tests that they can do that you can already do yourself. You can find these tests online anyway and go through them yourself. The more processes that they have to pad their service out, give it credibility, and then charge for, the better as far as they're concerned. This is a monetary scandal. It's a rip-off. It can be justified in lots of different ways, but it's still a rip-off, and it's bad for society.
I'm thinking maybe it's got bigger and bigger and bigger, this autism thing, she says. It's got so much bigger. People are starting to go down that road a lot more than others, and it's suddenly become a thing that people self-diagnose themselves with, and they don't mind paying out that money for the test. It should really be as simple as it was. Just an hour-long talk with somebody who really knows what the subject's about, and then coming out the other end and going, yeah, that's it, it's done. And it was all done in an hour. Would have been perfect for me, because it was like something you would give a child. And that's why, in a way, I felt a little bit like I'm an imposter here, because the test was, I just felt weird with it. You know, the whole, you know, sort of, is this person in this picture book, what are they feeling? And it was a little bit condescending, I felt, but maybe they were trying to like a one-size-fits-all diagnosis tool.
My takeaway, very basically put, is that in the very early stages of development, there's some breakdown in connection and communication. And sometimes that's what these tests are trying to reveal or discover.
We already have a number of different models to discover people's autistic identity that don't rely on 1950s ideas about locked-in syndrome, refrigerator mothers, and autism being a communication impossibility, which is almost how it is framed in the medical literature up until the 2000s. And after the 2000s, there's so much information out there that could be adopted by the professions that make everything that you've experienced unnecessary. I would say that what we experienced here in Scotland is a move towards that. A single person making a sensible decision from their own experience and knowledge, rather than these committee-based situations that sometimes happen. It feels as though we are being used as a group, as a disabled group, rather than being supported in many quarters. It feels as though we are justification of people's services and wages more than we are a valued member of the society that needs a little bit of support. Changing that is a really big ask, but it is happening, and it is going to happen gradually over time. More and more professionals are realizing that these outdated models need retiring. But my concern is that we have to get to the younger people in the professions to reinforce their concepts of autism as a neurodevelopmental or a neurological difference rather than a neurodevelopment impairment. That's the task.
And in the workplace as well, for people to be prepared for what they need to do to help to support somebody with autism. I've worked in a lot of different jobs where I've only been there for a short while because there's no place for me there and I didn't fit in. I couldn't get with the beat of what's going on around me. I was doing things in my own way. There have been jobs where I've basically been ejected from them because they said that I'm not doing the right things, but nobody ever really knows how to deal with a new member of staff who comes out as autistic. This is all my experience. I'm not generalizing, but some of the places I've been have been really snippy about it. They didn't want to make it comfortable for me. They just wanted everything to work out so that I went by their rules or danced to their rhythm. It's all right getting a diagnosis, but when you go out into the world and then you start presenting yourself that to people and being honest, I'm autistic and I would like to join your company, but you need to do this, this and this, you get ejected from that.
Yeah, everybody's insecure.
The last paragraph. So I have, at that point I was sleeping badly, feeling rotten, and my head was just spinning with everything. I was so nervous about it all. I said, but this feeling is not going to win. Even if all I ever do is speak of my own experiences, then so be it. Every day, for pretty much every autistic person, it is a mental battle to be part of the crowd, to colour within the lines and conform. Surely the work it takes to disguise oneself makes imposters of us all. It's too late for me now. After 40 years of introspection, I'm out there and I've thrown away my crayons.
Is that a sense of relief at the end of the day that you've got through this and now you're in a better place?
Yeah. My relationship with my diagnosis has changed since I first got it, to a point now where I can sit and talk about it and feel actually pretty okay with it, and feel that I'm part of a society of people who, they think differently and have different ideas to mine, but we can be out there and different and weird and be proud of that. Acceptance, self-acceptance is so much better than having to get that validation elsewhere. And that's what I've always worked on. I have said a number of times, I don't need other people particularly. If I have to, I'll sit in my own space and just do what I do. I've never sought out a crowd that I had to fit into. I insert myself into places and people just have to deal with it. But now I do feel relief. It's nice to be able to be in a place now where, you know what, it's okay. I can tell people how it is. And I won't try and, there's no mental battle anymore. It is as it is. And I can push myself forward and do things that are scary. And honestly, it feels great when you've done them.
Do you find when you're in your personal space that things come to you? I've noticed when I switch off trying, there's a kind of serendipity that comes in. But things randomly kind of make sense. I'm not trying to make sense of them, and sometimes the best people I've ever met and the best relationships I've had and involvements and engagements have happened in that space. I've not been out there actively trying, pressurizing myself, getting all uptight about it all. I've let it all go. And then, wow, something turns up.
Yeah, I have a bit of a sense of this. When you're trying to self-direct, when you're trying to create a future and say that it should be like this and I'm going to try and make it like that, you've narrowed your focus to such a degree that you're more likely to come against blank walls because you've got a very specific thing in mind. But if you can get yourself to a position where you're relaxed enough to be open to notice the things around you and go with the good things and find, instead of seeking out, I must go to this party and I must meet a girl, to get to yourself a situation where you're wandering around your life and you're more open and accepting that when a girl speaks to you, you're happy to speak back to them, and it's in a situation that isn't pressured and you're just being yourself. That's when you're more likely to strike up a relationship. It's this trying too hard, so you're focused and you're unable to notice what's around you.
And of course, it's easier said than done. Sometimes what happens is people respond to you as you are, and we end up with those relationships and people. Like if we're high energy or whatever, maybe we attract high energy, or the opposite. It really depends on the balance. But I think, yeah, we're maybe agreeing on a freer kind of space with less self-involved, where it's not all about us. But that sounds a bit too judgmental.
Well, for me, this comes back again to the, if we take the idea of diagnosis again, and I put forward the proposition that for some people, finding community first, then finding explanations, and then finding diagnosis might be the right way round. And the reason I put that is because if you've got this idea that you might be autistic and you hang out with autistic people a bit more, you're going to end up with a serendipity of understanding and explanation by being open to being around them and noticing difference and similarity. And that should give you much more of a foundation of your own confidence when you are then confronted with some strong information that might conflict with your identity a bit. So putting people in amongst other autistic people feels to me like that's where people get their quietness, their confidence, their ability to be in the moment and get the best opportunities to understand and explore things, because they're not progressing on with this single focus of getting a diagnosis.
And also, having a diagnosis is not the end of the line. It's not like you get there and that's it and that's the end and everything's where it should be. It throws up a whole lot of new questions in your head. Where do I go from here and what do I do? And do I accept this or reject it? Which is something I did earlier on. I didn't find that, getting past that point, some people were quite staunch that they didn't think that I was autistic, people that I knew and who were quite close to me. So from that point on, it's really having the courage to tell people that, you don't know what autism looks like, and I am autistic, and thank you very much, and that's it. It's the journey on from the diagnosis is a one that you have to tackle as well.
I haven't actually told anyone apart from services and GP and one autistic friend. Oh, and here.
Which is fine. It really is. It's everybody's business, everybody's personal business, what they do. That once that diagnosis is there, who you tell and whether you want to tell people is a choice. And that's a big thing. And everybody's got to do it their own way. I wanted to tell everybody because I just felt really like I wanted everybody to know that this is what I am. I still have some social life out there and I do have family. So I wanted to tell everybody, I wanted to put it to my chest and say, I've got the medal now and it's there and it's mine and this is what I am. And now you all understand me better or hope that you understand me better. Not always the way.
I'm thinking about Captain Scarlet, that TV series used to say spectrum is green.
Yeah, I remember that. I like that.
Kids' programs of the 1970s and 60s. This revealing your autism, I think, is a decision to make at every juncture, and it's not something you can take as a badge of honor that, yes, I'm entirely openly autistic. I'm relatively well known in my small town, and that means I have had disputes and fights with quite a number of people, disagreeing with them, and lots of other people who really get me and understand me. So I'm very Marmite as far as people go. I tend not to emphasize my own autism when people have a negative idea of me, or if I'm going into a new situation and I'm angry and I've got to complain in a shop or take the world on again, I try not to have that associated with autism in any way, because I feel as though it's giving autistic people a bad name, because, you know, my choices about going around life is going to affect people. But as far as open with people where it's a longer dialogue, a longer conversation, or I am in a good mood and I'm happy to be an advocate out there to strangers, it just feels like a lovely, cool thing to be doing. It's a positive, freeing experience for myself to explain to a stranger who says to me, "Oh, you don't strike me as autistic," and not be offended by that and take that as a cue for me to go into my Autistic Radio advocacy mode. And I enjoy that. I enjoy that little bit of it. It's, you hand to people the word autism and they have got no fucking idea what to do with it. You know, some people immediately go to, oh, well, that's kids that can't speak. Or other people will go to, oh, I seem to remember that terrorist said that they were autistic and tried to get off the death penalty. You know, so some people who've taken that word and then they're not going to easily be changed in their ideas of autism, a bit like people who are openly gay. You would be careful to say to a bigot, yes, I'm gay, but you would be more open with members of your family, you know?
Yeah, there can be baggage. Sometimes I feel I haven't told anyone because there's actually no one to tell. But there's something you were saying there about, oh God, I've totally forgotten now. I can't keep up.
Okay, finally. It's just a really stupid story, this, but, you know, I wear it on the outside because, you know, I look unusual to the outside, being, you know, sort of shaven-headed and DM booted or this sort of thing. I went on holiday and this woman came up to me and she looked me straight in the face and went, "Are you poorly?" And I said, "What?" She said, "Are you poorly?" Because she thought because I had short hair that I'd, you know, gone through something very tough. I said, "No, I'm autistic." She just didn't know how to react to it. She made an assumption about me from the outside. And I felt really slighted by that. That was her definition of me. as a poorly person because I wasn't fitting in with my surrounds.
Wow, not fitting in with your surrounds. Great.
I was on a cruise ship, so I couldn't get away from anybody. But yeah, I wasn't fitting in there at all. I had a nice time, but everybody there was of a certain kind. And as soon as you stick out as being unusual, somebody comes over and asks you an incredibly rude question like that. It's like, wow, I can't believe you did that to me.
Yeah, and what are they all about? It's not like there's a dress code on a cruise ship, is there? I mean, this is the 21st century. Some people are eccentric little characters like that, aren't they? They're such stuck in their ways. Talk about, not being part of the surrounds. They're like totally embedded in it.
It's no more than a floating hotel, dear. We don't sit at the captain's table wearing our best frock. The thing is, I felt so very branded with this idea that there was something deeply wrong with me because I'm not doing what they're doing, the bar and the casino. I just wanted to hang out and go to a few different countries and get a bit of sunshine. I just want to do what I do.
She was probably jealous of your DMs.
Autistic Radio is about us, it's for us, and it's from us. Autistic Radio is about you, it's for you, and it can be from you. We have every single Sunday drop-in, 4:44 p.m. every Sunday. That's not live, that's us getting together, us talking, community. Every Sunday, Harry leads a 5:55 p.m, a discussion around the Facebook page that he creates. Involve yourself by suggesting what we should talk about next. Share it with Harry. And then, the bigger picture. Advocate. Use us. Speak to the world. Your project, your idea, your enthusiasm. We have a whole range of different programs that will fit what you want. As far as listening goes, there's some challenging stuff out there. Because amongst the identity, the entertainment, and the community, we also make serious programs with autism professionals, challenging their ideas and bringing what you say in other spaces to them. A lot of those are difficult listens, but it's a holistic gathering. It comes all together. Autistic Radio is very varied. We need a favour. To encourage us, we need you to share us. When you share us, you give autistic people power. When you share us, you make us impossible to ignore. When you repost on LinkedIn and Facebook and anywhere else, you're advocating for everybody in the autistic community. So pick the things that you're happy with and get them out there. So thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you from all of us.